Welcome to Difficult Conversation Africa broadcast. I present to you the host, Yinka Olaito.
All right, well, welcome to Difficult Conversation African podcast, a platform where we discuss issues that many are afraid to discuss because they feel that they need to postpone such kind of conversation. But such conversations are highly essential and vital for development. In today's episode, I will be looking at African image and leadership challenge. And as usual, you know that I will always give you a background to what we are going to be discussing before I introduce my guest. Brand value is really important, and it is vital to the way people perceive your brand. We have national brand, and we have the executive brand that drives such brand. If the executive brand are not aware or they create more challenges for such brand, the perception of that brand and its value may not work well. But in today's world, many national brands continue to use the old syllabus, hoping that things will change. But to continue to use the old syllabus and expect a change, it is a definition of insanity. And so it is important for African leaders and African brand owners and drivers to appreciate the fact that whatever happened, the perception of their brand value will seriously affect their perception. To be a strong brand that command value, executive leadership must realize their role and then see the effect such are actually bringing to it. In this episode, our focus is on African image, leadership, challenge. Every brand has its own challenge, but story and narrative that we tell ourselves and the way we push such stories ahead are very, very vital. And therefore, Africa can do better and change the perception of if strategic efforts are put into the storytelling narrative that require. My guest today is Dr. Thebe Ikalafeng. Thebe is a frontline Africa brand and marketing communication expert, a public speaker with over 3 decades experience gained through working for Fortune 500 companies and more. And he is the founder of Brand Leadership Africa. Welcome, Dr. Thebe Ikalafeng.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Yinka. Thank you for having me over in Nigeria, my favorite country.
Okay, that's very fine. You are welcome to the show. So let's dive straight to the question. Image is central to a brand perception. Why is this difficult for brand owners and leaders to appreciate, Dr. Thebe?
Because I think a lot of them have not been able to see the correlation between how a reputation or an image of a country translates to the bottom line. So there was a study which was done recently by Africa No Filter, and it showed that on estimate, African countries have to pay an additional $4.2 billion on their on interest on their sovereign debt because of the negative image of the continent. So if many of them are able to see that the negative image cost is very costly, they'll then be able to focus their energies. I think for a long time they were not able to do that, but now I think they're going to begin to pay attention to it. It should be simple to see because if you've got a negative image as a person, nobody wants to be associated with you, nobody wants to invest in you, nobody wants to visit you, nobody wants to live in your country.
That's very, very, very hard. They need to know. But why is it that it is difficult for them to know? In the course of your work, what have you seen that are the major challenges for them to understand this?
I think the difficult challenge for many leaders to understand this is because of the focus. Because a lot of us Africans, we spend too much time going out to the rest of the world to go back instead of looking down in our own countries and fixing problems, because a lot of us spend all our energies as Africans looking outside than looking in. If we can focus our energies and looking at our countries and the opportunities and the potential and what other people are seeing in our countries, then we'll be able to do that. But I think we just don't have the right leaders, unfortunately. And I think it's what Salif Johnson once said. He says, Africa is not poor, it is just poorly led.
That is the impact of executive brand on brand value is very, very vital. Like you said, we go around cap in hand, not understanding the potential that we have. These are some of the things. So we go to the second question that is very vital for me. Data, storytelling are essential to a brand engagement. Unfortunately, the story we tell and the story that we accept from the Western media and the one that our own media is telling is not really, really helping. Why, in your work as a marketing communication, how much of the problem do you see where data and storytelling becoming an issue?
Well, data has always been a problem in the continent. We've never been able to understand, to put a finger on where the continent is. Even now, let's talk about Nigeria. When you ask Nigerians how many people live in Nigeria, they'll say 200, 250, 300.
220, 250.
They say,
that's true.
oh God, there's lots of us now. So now if you can't even tell how many people are in the country, you won't be able to serve them. You don't understand what are the challenges and the issues because you can't plan for that which you cannot measure. So that's the problem. But the other bigger problem is we just don't own our story as Africans. If you look at many of the books which are written in the continent, about the continent, most of them are written by outsiders. Another study has shown that 63% of the people who write about Africa have never been in Africa, yet their books are all over the shelves. So when we, even Africans, want to reference us, we read them. So we read outsiders about us, the insiders. That's the challenge. We don't own. I mean, your very own Chinua Achebe once says, until the lion learns how to tell its own story, tales of the hunter will always be glorified. So the hunter is the one who's busy writing stories about Africa, while us, the lions, are lying down hungry.
You've used the right word. We don't learn to tell our own story. In a recent conversation that I was having with some League of African lead ambassadors, and we were in conversation and said that even the African Union do not even have the money, that we depend on other external people to give us the money, and whoever play the piper, we always dictate the tune. And therefore, our storytelling cannot be complete until we are ready to take the bull by the horn and to appreciate the fact that we have good story from here that need to be told. Okay, for many African nations, evolving has been a challenge, and that has caused them like declining trust, drift emission, and being outpaced by others. Trust is an issue, and Africa, because in some cases, some countries, the story that have been told and that have been perpetrated by the Western media, and which some of the local media are also enforcing, is that of corruption. So how do we evolve if the only story that we are told is about their disempowering story?
Because the problem with the rest of us Africans is that we are the biggest problems. So the rest of the world is not the problem. The problem with Africa is Africans. So we cannot continue blaming the rest of the world over 60 years since we got our independence, that we now start blaming. We've been running these countries. But unfortunately, I think Thomas Sankara says, the one who feeds you rules you. So because you've got a cap in hand, they then dictate what the story should be. Because, I mean, that's why we have to appreciate Donald Trump. We have to appreciate Donald Trump taking away his money with USAID. Because now we need to learn how to hunt ourselves. We need to learn how to feed ourselves. Because we cannot expect the rest of the world to be the nanny for Africa. And because whenever they feed you, then they must tell you what the story that they want to see. Because nobody does anything for nothing. There's no charity in this world. Everybody does something for themselves
At all.
reasons. And the problem for the continent is that I ran a Brand Africa Forum in 2010, and it's still true now. Jane Naidu said, everybody's got an agenda for Africa, but Africa doesn't have an agenda for Africa. That is our problem.
So how do we lead an agenda from within? I know that you speak at different conferences, you speak to leaders, and you help people, an organization, a national branch in shaping there. What has been your experience in this area? That how do we do this exactly that you just mentioned?
Well, I think all of us have to do what we can with what we have where we are. So, from my area of branding, I'm driving a brand-led agenda. I'm driving the idea that as Africans, we need to buy and support Made in Africa. We need to do what Americans have done since 1933 and drive an agenda for Africans to buy, to hire, and to serve Africans. We need to do that. That's the one side. So from your side in the media space, you then need to say, how me in the media space, how can I begin to tell positive stories about or rather authentic stories about the continent? Because, some stories are not positive and others are not negative. But a negative story told by an African, a negative story told by an African is different from a negative story told by a foreigner, because an African will put context to it. They will understand how and why, and they'll be able to tell their story authentically and with the right care. So I think from a media perspective, from a branding, I mean, you've got people like in Nigeria, you've got people like Dangote who are doing their best to move the continent forward.
Exactly.
That the cement that we use is made in Africa. The oil that we use to fry to get our puff is made in Africa. The oil that we use to drive our cars comes from Africa. I mean, we are the continent that has got 60+% of the most arable land in the world, yet we are importing $115 billion of food every year. Why?
Okay, you and I know as a brand expert that the internal audience are very, very key if you're going to be successful. But the problem with most of the internal audience in Africa, mainly citizens, is that some of them are not persuaded that what comes from Africa is very, very good enough for them. And therefore, when you preach buy homegrown product, you find out that some of them still believe that they need to import because of the colonial mentality that we already have. How do we shape the mentality of the internal stakeholder so that they begin to see the need that whatever we produce in Africa is good enough for Africa, and it helps us to build our own brand instead of investing in another person's brand?
Well, I mean, when I told you that Africans are the problems for Africa, I can't blame the rest of the world for Africa's problems. I can only blame an African, because an African, and I just read, I read now yesterday that a very senior person in Uganda went to Russia or somewhere for medical treatment, and he was there for 6 months, or Germany, was there for 6 months. And when he came out of there, he came back to Uganda and built a church instead of building. And he says, it is thank you to the country. Now, let's think about it. Let's think about Nigeria, Malawi, Kenya, South Africa. What are the biggest construction buildings going up? Churches. People are taking factories and are turning them into churches and are going into the churches to go pray for the jobs. Well, you just close down the jobs yourself. So how are you going to go pray for a job that you just took out? So that is the problem that we have. The problem that we have is we are the people who are creating the biggest problems for us. Because unfortunately, on the one hand, we have cap in hand asking for somebody to help us. On the one hand, we go down on our knees and pray for breakthrough instead of rolling up our sleeves and going into the factory to work for our own goods.
Yeah, we know that from post-COVID era, digitally enabled brand building has become something that nobody can run away from. And that, but interestingly, we have youth in Africa who are willing to drive this, but there's no enabling policy for most of them to actually do that. In your own experience, how do we begin to harness the capacity in technology to build a formidable brand for Africa, our national image, that send the right signal to us,
well, what we know
to the rest of the world?
What we know for certain is that technology has removed the barriers. So while we are dealing with the AFCFTA, while we're waiting for the Africa Free Trade Continental Trade and the laws and everything to come together, technology has already broken down the barriers. As from a technology perspective, but it's done two things. One, there's no barriers. Second, speed to market. And then third, it speaks directly to the individuals in the way they can reach them, because all of us have got a mobile phone in our hands. That's why the success of brands like M-Pesa are based on the fact that, one, they did not have to go through the long regulatory problems with banking. Two, they could do it quickly to market. And three, they could reach people in the most rural areas using technology. So technology for Africa is going to be very transformational. It's the most transformational thing, because we don't have time to be building bricks and mortars anymore, because our people are hungry and our people need solutions, and technology will get them to them faster.
Yeah, thank you for that. One other thing that is very vital that I think that we are still lacking in Africa, and I need you to speak to that as somebody who had spoken to many leaders across Africa in conferences and all that. There is a need for a system thinking and a shift into system building. Without a system, we can't continue to work on an idea that you want miracle to happen. We need to build system. Why is it difficult for us to have built system that will make and benchmark some of the progress that we have made in Africa? What are the things that you think we can do now in system? Because building a brand will require that you build a system. And we need to begin to shift towards building a strong system that support the brand we want to build. So what will you say to that? That the need for a system that work that we must put in place, because most of the time we have documents to show that we are serious, we want to do something, but there's no system or implementation process that can allow that thing to work.
Well, if you go to Rwanda, you can start your business in 48 hours. So I don't understand how us in here in our continent, in Nigeria, in South Africa, in Kenya, they make you wait for months just to register a business. It's a simple thing. And technology will enable you to be able to do it, not even in 24 months, in 24 hours, you can even do it in 24 minutes. So what the system that we need to do is we need to make the system work. The problem is the system is not working because we have corrupted the systems, us Africans, because we are the only people anywhere in the world where we have to corrupt people to do the right thing. So we don't corrupt people to do the wrong thing. We corrupt people to do the wrong thing, do the right thing. So we pay corruption money for a person to give us a license in the time that it takes to do a license. That's the problem that we have. The problem that we have is, I think we need a kind of an earthquake or something to swallow the bunch that we have right now in governments and and leading us. And let's restart this continent scratch afresh with people who care about the continent, who care about the future. That is our problem.
How do you think that will work?
Well, I mean, I know it sounds abrupt the way I say it, but the truth of the matter is we just don't have the right people leading us. There's pockets of excellence here and there. We can begin to put together these excellences and say, if Rwanda knows how to do this, can we learn from Rwanda? If South Africa knows banking, can we learn from South Africa banking? If Nigeria understands mobile money, can we learn from Nigeria? We need to build pockets of excellence, and then we need to spread that excellence across the continent.
That is. But one thing I've seen traveling across Africa, and like you will understand, we have the capability to have a brand-led, homegrown solution to African problem. And I've seen that in the power of the youth and their power to aggregate interest. But oftentimes, you find out that these brand-led solutions are not being implemented, or the policies are not there. What is the challenge? How do we overcome this? Because Africa can actually, we have the capability. I've seen that power in the youth, in the young people, bringing out homegrown, brand-led solutions that can resolve African problems. But the challenge is we are full of talk, but without action. How do we move from here?
I think it's Lumumba from Kenya, Professor Lumumba, who says Africa likes
to. Yeah, remember, yeah.
Professor Lumumba says Africa starts things and that it doesn't finish. That's our problem. We're constantly starting because we are too intelligent, but none of us know how to roll up our sleeves. We want to be called doctors doctors, professors, and chairman, but nobody wants to be called a welder, and nobody wants to become a cleaner, a street sweeper. And we forget that to get things done, you have to roll up your sleeves.
So as we round up, based on your experience, what have been some of the things that you are proud of as a brand leader, speaking in different countries, speaking to leadership? What has changed in the course of doing this? And then from your brand leadership academy, how happy are you with the outcome that you have gotten?
Thank you. So I think going around the continent and the world, the thing that I'm excited about this continent is seeing the many young brands that are coming up from young people, because they are tired of waiting for the old people who sleep in parliament all day, and they are decided they are no longer going to ask for permission. They are now going to be progressively creating ideas. If you look at the fintech in Nigeria, you look at fintech in Kenya, you look at young consumer brands in South Africa, you look at young fashion brands around the continent. The young people have decided this is their future. They account for 70% of the continents, of people under the age of 30 in the continent. They are going to take the future into their hands. And to me, that's the most beautiful thing to see. And it's also beautiful to see that the cost of entry is no longer as high as it used to be because of technology. Because of technology now, people now don't need to be spending a whole lot more to get started. They are no longer asking for permission, no longer waiting for their turns. They are now going ahead into the future that they want. To me, that's the most beautiful thing to see. And what we try to do with Brand Africa is to keep on that, to drive that agenda of ensuring that Africans are creating and supporting made in Africa brands. And with the Africa Brand Leadership Academy is to give them the skills to be able to do just that.
Thank you. And maybe this last question. I've been wondering, why is it difficult for professionals to be able to effect a lot of changes when they are working with corporate organizations? For I know that when you are with Fortune 500, you have made a lot of changes with most of the companies that you serve as marketing communication expert. And I'm wondering that I was looking forward to that kind of thing, that will be able to transform some of other national brands that you have worked with. Where is the challenges of ensuring that you can bring the same power that you reflect on the corporate service to the national brand?
We are doing that, but we are doing that for the young private sector brands. The big brands are already established, they are going. The corporate, the public service brands, the problem is that most of them are run by a bunch of incompetents who just want to be corrupted, and rather than to do the right thing.
That's a fact.
And so it is becoming more and more difficult to work with the public service because they're not interested in change. They're interested in the change in their pocket, and that's the problem that we have. But with the young brands, that's where our energy should focus. I think all of us, we should focus on the young people, because the old people, their time has passed. They are going to be dead very soon. They're going to be dead very soon. And unfortunately, they are going to die with their dead ideas. Many of the ideas have not changed since 1963 in Ethiopia. It's our chance for the young people now to put in place the ideas that will move the continent forward.
Thank you, Dr. Thebe Ikalafeng. You are still vibrating, like I've listened to, and I'm so happy to have people like you who believe so much in Africa and who is leading that change. I believe that we can have a crop of more people like you who certainly have the confidence that Africa will be good one day. And that's the essence why we have difficult conversation. There are conversations we must hold, and there's people like you need to come up with more. And I know that you are coming to Nigeria maybe in May. Hopefully you'll be able to change something with your speech and your vibrancy. Thank you once again. To our listener, I'm sure I will have Dr. Thebe Ikalafeng soon. When, I don't know, but I know we are going to have this part 2 of this. And so I want to say thank you. Thank you for always giving us the feedback. Thank you for always sending us your own idea on how to make Difficult Conversation Africa podcast a great place to be. And we are working on that. Thank you, Dr. Ikalafeng Thebe. Enjoy your evening. And I wish you all the best.
Thank you for listening to this episode. For inquiry, please send an email to info@difficultconversationafrica.org. Telephone 0809 3160 591. Please follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Difficult Conversation Africa. See you soon.